live with the community. This is the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform Development Biweekly Call. Today is March 28th. My name is David Warner. For all of you that have forgotten me, I don't blame you. Who could ever remember this guy? But I am excited to be back. So we have got an amazing call in store for you all today. We're going to start out with our agenda, which is, of course, the latest updates on the community. We're going to talk about .NET libraries, PowerShell, Microsoft Teams Toolkit, script samples, team samples, Power Platform samples, then, of course, everybody's favorite time, picture time. So get those cameras ready. And then we've got at least two amazing presenters of the day. Maybe that third guy, I don't know. We'll see how he turns out. Lee Ford is here to show us how to capture Teams call records with Microsoft Graph subscriptions. And then Michael is going to show us using JavaScript and Cloud Flows to download files from a SharePoint document library and Power Pages. And then yours truly will show you a couple of cool new tools to utilize for Power Platform and M365 animation. So excited to show you all those things. But first, let's talk about some resources that are available to you in the community. We have got videos. We have got a LinkedIn group for discussions. We've got open source projects, sample galleries, lots of tools and tricks and tips for you to take advantage of. Things like SPFX web parts and Power Platform samples, list formatting samples, all the above. All these videos are here for you to consume for free. You don't need a Netflix subscription. You just need a community subscription, which is free. So take advantage of it. You only need to remember one URL, that is aka.ms/community/home, and it will absolutely give you access to all these wonderful tools and tips and tricks. So check it out today, bookmark it. It is going to be your landing spot, and we're going to be seeing some updates on that very soon. So it's going to be shiny and new and cool and even better. And because you're on this call, you probably like community calls. So we want to remind you that we have plenty of community calls. You might even say we have a plethora. It means a lot to us because you are here. So take advantage of these calls. You can go to ak.ms/community/calls. Get the invites so that your time zones are all correct when they change around the world, and you can join us for all these calls. So we've got the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform. This is each Tuesday. It's weekly. It's with Microsoft-only presenters, so you're hearing it directly from the horse's mouth or the mothership. We've got our monthly Power Platform call, our Office add-ins, and then, of course, our sibling M365 and Power Platform community, which you're on right now. And next week, the Viva Connections and SharePoint Framework. They are consistent. They are always there for you. Rain, sleet, or shine, we will be here for you. Holidays or not, and we will have something in store for you to see. Speaking of that Microsoft call, next week on the 2nd of April, we're not fooling there because it's the 2nd of April, right? So we've got three amazing demos. Nicole and Farham are going to show Introduction to SharePoint Web Kit, SharePoint Web UI Kit, Design Engaging Sites with Figma. And then we're going to see Enterprise Administration, Security, and Compliance with SharePoint Embedded. And Paolo is going to be here showing us creating Copilot for Microsoft 365 plugin with Copilot Studio. So definitely take advantage of that. It's going to be wonderful because we're getting all those speakers directly from Microsoft. And of course, Paolo is representing Microsoft in this case, so we're excited to see him there. All right, now you may be thinking, well, these are some cool things showing off, but guess what? I got cool stuff to show, and we know you do, and we want to see it. So we are inviting you to request to demo, and this is not some judgment that comes down. You just put in your information, and we'll get you scheduled. It's as easy as that. So don't worry if you think it's cool and it saved you time, or it's a cool project or a cool feature or solution that you're working on, and you want to share it with the community. We want you to because it's valuable. You spent your time. I guarantee others in the community will find it valuable as well. So take advantage of this. It is absolutely free. We'll reach out to you. We'll get you scheduled. We'll provide you some tips, and we'll make sure that everything is going right for you. So definitely, let me mute. All right. So definitely take advantage of that, and we would love to get you scheduled. Now, as you continue to reach out, again, we've seen our Sharing is Caring, one of my favorite initiatives that I started with Hugo Bernier and April Dunham and a number of other people, Emily, Louisa. It has been kind of hibernating, but now that I'm back from medical leave, we are going to be kicking this back off. So bear with us. I appreciate your patience. This program is here to provide hands-on guidance, and that means that we will walk you through how to accomplish things like, I don't know, filling out a GitHub pull request. What is a pull request? We will walk you through all of that together, and it is a live session. It is safe space, meaning that we do not record it, so you don't have to worry about asking those questions that you feel like maybe you should already know. Don't worry. Everybody's got questions, and the answers are not always evident. So we want you to feel comfortable asking those questions in a safe space. We don't record them. It is completely live, hands-on, and we walk you through it together. So keep an eye out for those office hours starting soon. We're going to get some more sessions set up, and we promise we'll kick it back off. But what is been alive and well and is absolutely thriving is our recognition program. This is a program that we are partnering with Credly on, so you get those official and accredited badges, just like that one that is spinning into the screen right now for community contributor. We're going to be processing a bunch more here in the next couple of weeks, and you'll see more coming out. Of course, all of our platforms and programs have a variety of badges associated with them as well, so you can double dip. It's a fantastic way to get recognized for the work that you're doing. And it's absolutely free. So all we need you to do is opt in once, of course, across all the years, and we will track you, aka.ms/community/recognition, and we will make sure that you are recognized for the amazing work that you're doing. All right. So let's get into some project-specific updates, and we're going to kick it off with PNP.NET Libraries and Bert.
Awesome. Thank you, David. For .NET, a few things. For the PNP framework library, actually, no things. So, but that's fine. It's pretty old and stable library, so there's no pending changes there. For the core SDK side, a couple of small fixes, and then I think the biggest change, which is coming, so it will be there very soon, is like a change on when you work with Vanity URLs, like you mentioned, there's some customers that have like collaboration.contoaster.com and teams.contoaster.com and so on. For those URLs, we had some issues with detecting ACS principals and add-ins, which is needed because we want people to move away from those. So we fixed that, and that's part will be also part of a new assessment tool release coming in pretty soon as well. But with that, I think that's all we did. So let's then move to PowerShell. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Bert. 52 billion requests, everybody, in 2024. Billion is amazing. Even Dr. Evil would be jealous. So awesome. Let's move on to PowerShell. We got them.
Awesome. Thanks, David. PNP PowerShell updates. So for those of you who don't know, PNP PowerShell is a PowerShell library that you can use to connect with various Microsoft 365 services like SharePoint, Graph, Teams, Enter ID, and so much more. What's the latest in the nightly builds? We had an annoying issue with get PNP flow commandlet. It was causing some timeout because there was some issue with the URL that we were using. So we fixed that. We also added an additional parameter, delay, deny, add, and customize pages enforcement. Yeah, it's quite a mouthful, but to the set PNP tenant command, which allows you to delay changing of the custom script in your site collections in the tenant as well till mid-November 22. And of course, we added a bunch of documentation updates as well. So that's important as well, documentation. So never forget. What else? Would absolutely love to hear from you on the discussion forum or on the issue list. So feel free to reach out to us on GitHub as well as on Discord. So yep, that's it from my end. Over to you, David.
Awesome. Thank you, got him. Let's move over to Teams Toolkit with John Miller as it flies away. Woo, there you go.
Woo. Thanks, David. Teams Toolkit is our code-first developer tools for building apps for Teams, also Outlook and M365. So we have extensions in VS Code, Visual Studio, and we also have a CLI tool. And as I put here, these versions are finally released. So 5.6 is available in VS Code. 17.9 has been out for VS for a little bit. So we're working on the 17.10 previews. And there's a new version of the CLI, that's 3.0, and then it delivers all those features that you see there. So check those out. And there's also a new pre-release version available in VS Code. So in there, you'll see us be focusing on how you can build custom copilots. So we have some new templates for that and some features for that. And we'll also start to see Python support in there. So if you're building AI apps and using other SDKs with lots of Python-y things, we'll also be supporting that. So if you want to chat about that or give me any feedback, there's a link down there, TTK chat. That'll schedule some time directly with me. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Excited for the Python support. Everyone's excited except Indiana Jones. So awesome. All right. Let's get into Microsoft Graph Toolkit, or MGT as we know about it. Seb is not here today, but we got some updates. We're live with MGT.4 version 4.2.1. So make sure you update your packages. And there's a public preview of MGT chat, so you can bring conversations into your context. So Seb is always looking for folks that want to help out. So get involved, reach out to him. It's a great way and one of the coolest tools out there to ensure that Graph is easily imported into your solutions. Okay, how about some script samples? Another easy way to contribute to the community. Paul, tell us more.
Hey, David, thank you. So Script Samples is a place where you can share PowerShell scripts or Bash scripts with the community. So this could be written in the Microsoft Graph SDK, PNP PowerShell, SPM Management Shell. We've got a range of tools, so whatever you prefer, we can always adjust the site if it's not on the list, so which is super, super cool. So we've had some great new contributions for this. So we've got 3 new scenarios with PnP PowerShell. So we've got trim file versions and archive site collection using the newest Microsoft 365 archive by Casper Larsen. We've got retracting SVFX solutions from HubSite and associated sites by Rashmi Aklu. And we just had a kit yesterday from Nick Bertoli around the M365 Consultant Script Kit, which contains three very powerful scripts to allow you to scan your SharePoint online tenants, your OneDrives, and list and libraries and so forth. And then we've got some updated scenarios, so CLI for M365 from Ganesh Snap, where you can get your custom fields within list and libraries within the site. So, which is super, super cool. So thank you for all those wonderful contributions. And if you need help getting started, we've either got a contributing link on the site to at least get you some background on what's involved, or feel free to reach out to myself on Twitter or LinkedIn. Happy to help you get going. And when you're doing your first time contributor, there is a badge for you. So if you sign up for the recognitions program, make sure you are opted in, then you get a badge for your wonderful contribution. So thank you very much. And back to you, David.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. And yes, friends, get involved. This is one of the easiest ways. We all have utility scripts that are fantastic and useful. Share them with the world and get rewarded for it and recognized as well. Okay, let's move over to Microsoft Team samples. Bob is not here today, but we do have a team sample available new from the amazing Gary Trender. Chat with your data. So those times when the family won't talk to you, you can chat with your data. It's a bot in Microsoft Teams. Take advantage of it. Check it out. You can see all of our samples at ak.ms/community/samples, and we put some links in the chat for you there. So thank you, Gary, for providing that. Very, very cool stuff. And last but not least, our Power Platform samples with Kate.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much, David. So Power Platform Sample Selection Gallery, it's a very good, great place to find different tools for your different projects like components, flows, applications, and much more. All for free and easy to use. So just follow the link and explore them. And plus, we'd love for you to add your own creations. We are excited to see what you have done and what you have made. If you are ready to show, or if you need any help, just follow the link or ping me and I'm ready to help. And let's grow together. Thank you. Woo. Back to you, David.
Awesome. Kate's standing by, everybody, so get those phones ringing. All right, let's move on to picture time. So turn on those cameras, and Vesa will take over, and he will show off how awesome you all look. There we go. Excellent.
There we go. Pixel perfect today. So this is looking really good. So I'm not going to enable my camera then in this case because, oh, and we have a cat. We have a cat. We have almost a cat. There's some sort of censorship happening with cats, clearly. No, yes, here we go. There's a cat. Excellent, excellent. So we do have 50 seats in the room. So let's wait a few more seconds until we get the recording ongoing. Let me start the Camtasia in here. This is looking really good. A lot of different familiar faces. Don in the middle, you'll be the example. Hands are ready to wave. You're smiling. This is a good start. There we go. Excellent. And I will put the recording on and we'll grab a GIF animation out of that. Here we go. And everybody follow Don. There we go. Excellent, excellent. Brilliant. Good to see these happy faces. And yeah, Todd, you're doing really well as well. So that's really good on the third flow on the top. So cool. I guess we're good. So let's get back on the normal show. Back to you, David.
Excellent. Thank you, Vesa. Well, we have, like I said, at least two amazing presenters today. So Lee is going to kick it off for us with how to capture Teams call records using Microsoft Graph subscriptions. Lee, take it away.
Thank you, David. I'm going to say three good presenters. I'll be kind. Okay, let me just share my screen. Okay. So let me make that bit for you. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about building Teams call logger using Graph subscriptions. So let's get into it. We don't have too much time. A bit about myself. I'm from the UK. I work for a company called Simity. And I pretty much work in the M365 dev space on a daily basis. You can catch me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, I submit all my code to GitHub, and obviously you can sort of read all my articles on my blog. So the agenda is really to go through. I'm just going to quickly go through what a graph subscription is in case you're unfamiliar. I'm going to go why and how you would use it with a Teams call record. and then we'll go through a demo, and hopefully it all works. Graph subscription, it's a way to subscribe to a resource. So in this scenario, the resource is a call record. So effectively, every time a resource is updated or created or deleted, we are subscribing for that change. And by subscribing, it means we're not having to effectively poll for changes or scrape for changes to see has anything changed in the last 10 seconds. Has anything changed in the last 10 seconds? It's more you tell us when something's changed, which is obviously a much better way of approaching the scenario. So how do you set up a graph subscription? We're just going to quickly go over the steps. Hopefully it will help the code talk a bit better to you. So first thing is you need to create a subscription. So you need to provide some parameters. So the first one is the expiry date, then the type of resource. So in this case, pull records. You then need to say, what type of change am I looking for? Is it just when it's created or when it's updated or deleted or whatever? That is sort of the next parameter, and then finally the endpoint. So you're telling Graph, okay, I want to have call records when they've been created, and let me know for the next 2 days or something. Obviously, when Graph receives that subscription, it needs to know where to send the data to, so to notify us that something's been created or whatnot. So once we've set up that subscription request, it will then send a fake notification or pseudo notification to your notification endpoint to validate, to prove that you are listening, you are running on that endpoint that you've specified in the request. And then once that's validated, you just receive notifications until it expires. Typically, it's you don't want it too long. You don't want to open for days on end. It's more 24 hours, 48 hours, something like that. And then the idea is that you will effectively renew that subscription before the current one expires, sort of in perpetuity. So this is a sample request. So in this case, I've said, here's a subscription. I want the change type. So only when it's created, I don't worry about it being updated or deleted or whatever. The resource in here, I've done it as a parameter. So obviously we can change the resource type depending on what type of subscription it is. And likewise with the notification URL, it's just effectively my host name of my, wherever the code's running, and then /API/subscription notification. You can change that to whatever you want it to be, but that's what I'm using in this sample anyway. So why do you need to store call records? They're already in Graph, they're already in Admin Center and whatnot, and that's a great question. So up until very recently, there was no way to list call records. So if programmatically, if I wanted to go, oh, let's go get Lee's meeting call record from last week, there's no way to do that. Now I think it's in beta. You can pull those through, but you are limited to obviously what call records are currently in Microsoft Graph and by extension Microsoft Teams. So if you want to keep 7 years worth of records, you can't do that. You have to obviously be beholden to what Microsoft is holding. So if you go, oh, we need to keep for legal purposes, 7 years of data or something, then the only real option is for you to grab that data out via something like a subscription like we're doing here, storing it externally to Microsoft, and then you can obviously use it for however long you need. So solution overview of what I've got here is we've got Teams on the left. So when people are making calls and joining meetings, they're not completely unaware of what's happening here. Ultimately, a call record gets created. Obviously, that is then accessed through Graph. And then effectively, we're having a conversation between Graph and, in this case, I've got it running in a function app. And so any notifications, any setting up of subscriptions, all that is done between Graph and Azure Function app. And then just because I can store the data in JSON, I'm putting it in Cosmos DB. I could put it in something else if I wanted to, but just for simplicity, I'm putting it there, as obviously the payload from Graph will be in the format that I can just dump it into Cosmos DB. So I kind of achieve this through two functions. We've got something called a subscription manager, name I've just come up with, where we're just constantly maintaining that a subscription is active at all times. So like I say, we don't, an expiry date obviously is going to expire at some point. So the idea is that we are effectively looking to see if there's an existing subscription. If there is, we don't have to create a new one. if there's no subscriptions, i.e. one's lapsed, then we will then create a new one, and that way we're kind of always having a subscription ready to receive notifications. And then simply the other one, the subscription notification, is where we are receiving any data on that function and then storing it into Cosmos. So demo time. Let me just bring up my browser and hopefully it's here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate. I say simulate because I can't. Graph subscriptions aren't that fast, so it might not actually come through in the time we have for this demo. But I'm going to simulate effectively a call being made. So in this case, I'm just going to call just a dummy user that goes to voicemail. Still, it's technically a valid call. So I'm just going to initiate that now. Okay, so if I end that call. Okay, so that call now, in a few minutes, probably won't be in time for the end of the demo. That call then come through into us through as a subscription notification, and then we can then process it. So in the fullness of time, it will come through, but obviously we don't have that much time. So I'll just quickly go through some samples, and then what I can do is I can replay one of these previous calls that I did sort of 18 minutes ago, just to show you how it kind of works its way through the system. But effectively, the notification has, like I say, handles two things. The first part is a validation. So when we create a new subscription, we have to validate that subscription to say, yep, no, we are listening. Like we told you we're going to be here, we're here. Here's the response. So in this case, as soon as we set up a subscription, we get a request from the Graph, and then obviously we respond to it. And here's an actual notification from Graph. So in this case, we're listening on a call record type, and obviously we are then given the ID of the call record. And what we can then do with that ID is then subsequently go get the full data, because the notification never includes all the data, because it could be quite heavy. The idea is that you effectively store the ID, and then you can go get the data at your leisure. So you don't necessarily have to do it immediately after the notification. You don't have to necessarily handle it all in one go. So what I can do is I can just replay that same data. It's just gone through the system now. So if I just bring up VS Code, just zoom in a little bit, you can see this notification has just come through here. So that's the same ID that was on the ngrok tunnel. So effectively, the call comes in, it gets notification runs. We then process that notification and put it in a database. So I'm just going to quickly go back to the browser and just show how that sort of data lands. So to kind of, rather than just showing you it in Cosmos DB, which isn't that exciting, I've created a mirror in Microsoft Fabric that mirrors the Cosmos database. So this allows me to then kind of effectively have the data stored in Cosmos, but then mirrored across into Fabric, and then I can then use Power BI reports and whatnot to visualize it. So so if I refresh this, that last call that started DFF, that's come through here, and obviously now we've got all the information from Microsoft Graph. And then finally, if I show you the Power BI part, just bring this up here. Just got a report that comes through, and hopefully it comes through anyway. And this will just show you the data. Come on, Microsoft Fabric. There we go. Okay, cool. So yeah, those are the calls through. They're not particularly nicely formatted, but obviously this is just the raw data that's come through. You can see visually that that data has come through from Cosmos. Now, code-wise, it's pretty straightforward, hopefully, to follow. Like I say, we have two functions, and I'll just quickly go through them and sort of point out the key points to really focus on. So we have something called a subscription manager. So this is running on a cron job. So every 5 minutes, I run this bit of code effectively, and this code says, right, go get the subscriptions. So I have a method to get subscriptions. So I'll go list all the subscriptions on the in Graph that are currently live. and then I then filter on. Right, I'm looking for a subscription that's on, you know, the call records resource. So if it equals, if I have at least one that equals the call communications call records resource, then I'm good. Don't need another subscription. Otherwise, I go and create a subscription. And in that case, I effectively pass through how many days I want the subscription for, what resource I'm setting the subscription up for. So in this case, call records. And then this is the bit of code that I had on the slide, where we're going and creating a subscription. And then once that's set up, we're then ready to handle subscriptions via notifications. So from a notification point of view, this function is a HTTP trigger, so it's not on a timer or anything. And effectively, we have a very straightforward function going on here where we receive notifications from Microsoft Graph. And then up here, we have where we're going to process the notifications. And then effectively, on every record, we have to go and get the data from Graph, because, like I say, only the ID is sent to us, not all of the information, like, you know, the call record itself. So in that case, we have to go off and get the call records. Now, when you get a notification, it might include multiple IDs. It's not necessarily going to include one ID. It might be, oh, here's 10 new call records. So we have to sort of loop through them and go, oh, okay, here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3, and we kind of do them in batches within Graph. So in Graph, we're doing the batch request rather than doing 10 API calls to Graph to get 10 call records. Let's just do it all in one go. And then effectively, we're returning that data back. And then in here, we have a Cosmos DB output binding that binds it all together and effectively puts, when the function completes its run, puts it into Cosmos DB. And that's about it from a demo perspective. I think I've got one more slide, so I'll just bring that back up. I can click on the present thing. So I think I just quickly did a screenshot of this in case it didn't capture, but effectively what we have is we have the receiving notification from Graph. We then start an orchestrator. So we're using durable functions, which is sort of allows you to run things, you know, concurrently at scale. So if, you know, if it's a very busy tenant and you're getting, you know, call records almost every second, you can kind of scale it out to handle all the notifications. And then we're storing this notification information. And I think that is it. Last thing to say is thank you for listening. I've got the code on my GitHub. I think hopefully I'm going to put it somewhere, maybe in a PnP repo somewhere. Not entirely sure where it fits yet, but I think that's the plan anyway. So that's it from me.
Awesome stuff, Lee. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and link for that sample is in the chat. And Lee and I were talking yesterday about getting it into a PnP repo, so keep an eye out for that as well too. And then everybody can help contribute to it as well. So Lee, excellent job. Okay, we're going to move on to Michael, who's using JavaScript and Cloud Flows to download files from a SharePoint document library and Power Pages, bringing it all together. Michael, all right. Feel free to take on over.
Thank you, David. Let me just start sharing my screen here. So guys, I'm just going to begin with a quick presentation because I wanted to explain a bit of how things work behind the scenes on the Power Pages world, because I think some people, you know, it's not that familiar for some people as if it was a model-driven app or Power Apps and things like that. So if you guys don't know me yet or don't follow me, if you want to get in touch, you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me after the presentation. But what's all this about? The agenda for today is I'm going to go through initially the extensibility options for Power Pages, and then explore the 2 options to integrate Power Pages out of the box with SharePoint, and why we can't do it in the scenario that I wanted to demo, and the solution with Cloud Flows. And after that, I'm going to go through a quick demo and explain how all the pieces link together. So to extend Power Pages and customize and to expose data from Dataverse, basically we have the low-code options that everyone have heard. For example, we have the same abilities as we have in model-driven apps to expose forms and views into the Power Pages site. So we can use what we call entity lists and the basic forms and multi-step forms, which are simply views and forms that you configure in Power Pages, but at the end of the day, you have a model-driven app form set up on the background for those. Okay, it's like if you have a form in a model-driven app, you can expose it in Power Pages. But the only problem with this is that customization options, they are very limited. It's really easy to set up, but you cannot do a lot of custom code on top of them. You can do a few customization in rules and fields behaviors using jQuery or JavaScript. And you can also do, if you want to create full custom pages in Power Pages, you can leverage jQuery or JavaScript if you want to go through vanilla.js to do full code customizations. You can also use PCF controls as you use for Canvas apps or model-driven apps. And the advantage of doing custom pages like that is that you can call the Power Pages Web API. So it enables you to have all the power as you would be using the standard Dataverse Web API. There's a few limitations on that, but it's kind of, 80% of what the Dataverse Web API does, you can do with the Power Pages Web API. And you can also create custom pages in Power Pages using Liquid. That's an open source server-side language. Imagine like when you create an ASP.NET MVC page where you have the Razor language to create the pages. So you basically run Dataverse data and you can customize how it looks using Liquid. You can inject HTML tags and create pages with read-only purposes and also run fetch XML queries. But then comes the question, if I am customizing Power Pages so much with custom code and HTML and all of that, why would not I use a full custom web app instead? I see like the advantage is if you are building pro code customizations on top of Power Pages, it's similar to what you have in SharePoint. So if you are going to build a custom, very complex SPFX web part, the good thing is you leverage the standard SharePoint web APIs, the REST APIs, you leverage the security model as well. So for example, in the case of Power Pages, it's very similar. So you can configure you can configure data access using the table permissions in Power Pages, and all those pro code options, they will respect your permissions. So basically, it makes life easier in terms of enabling access to Dataverse data. And the scenario that I envisage as more powerful for Power Pages is obviously when you want to create a custom public website with Dataverse data. You can create, obviously, same sites for internal use, but in my opinion, I see the more potential to create those for public-facing websites. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel on creating public websites to expose Dataverse data. And then, as I mentioned, we have already some integration with SharePoint that is out of the box in Power Pages. We have the SharePoint libraries integration in Power Pages, but there's a dependency on the model-driven apps integration with SharePoint. That's basically, you have to enable that, you can enable that integration with SharePoint on the model-driven app side. If you want to enable attachments in database records in SharePoint. So basically, you expose SharePoint files in the model-driven apps that can then be seen in Power Pages, but they are tied only to the records you link them. So, for example, and then also you have a problem here that if you want to enable it, you have to be a global admin. Otherwise, you can't enable. So like a normal person cannot simply link a Power Pages site to SharePoint without having global admin's permissions. There is a problem on this is that, let's say, if you wanted to pick a random document library to expose in Power Pages without having that connection enabled, you can't do it out of the box. So for example, one scenario where we wanted to expose a bunch of PDF files or documents in our Power Pages site so that people can download the documents as document templates or something like that. You couldn't do it with this integration because it's tied only to those Dataverse records. So you cannot browse the libraries, basically. You can enable integration with Power Pages easily with SharePoint lists if you want. So like there's a new feature called the virtual tables where you can expose a table from SharePoint list or or a SQL Server table as a Dataverse table in Power Pages or Dataverse. It works exactly like you have business connectivity services in SharePoint to expose SQL data or external data. But the disadvantage is, even though you can pick any SharePoint site you want and then you can browse, you can only see lists. So like for a site that I used to this demo, for example, there's only one SharePoint library here and you cannot see it because it's enabled and available only for lists. And what we do then, for example, if we can't leverage this, but there's other options around, and the best option that we could use and to build a quick solution would be Power Automate, because you can leverage Power Automate integration with lots of other data sources, and SharePoint is one of them. So if you want to integrate anything with Power Pages now, especially data sources that they don't exist out of the box with an integration in Power Pages, you can then call a Power Automate flow that integrates with the data source you want and return the results to the Power Pages site. You could actually do it previously in the past, but the problem is you needed to use the HTTP connector, and then the HTTP connector didn't have any sort of authentication there. And now you have a new Power Pages connector that you can leverage to do the same, but it secures the calls into Power Automate to make sure that only the authenticated users can call your Power Automate flows. If you want to play around with it, you can use a developer plan, but it's just important to have in mind that whenever you are going to put it on production sites, Microsoft recommends you to have a Power Automate per flow license in production, just for scalability and all of other similar issues. And then before the demo, I wanted to explain quickly what's the main idea of the flows, just to make easier the whole process. Like if you want to call Power Automate flow from Power Pages in the code, what you have to do is you build the request payload, and then you send that payload as a parameter in JavaScript via post request. Those parameters, they have to match the trigger parameters from the flow Power Pages trigger. And what's cool now is that you can also identify who is the user calling the flow, and you have more parameters to do some data manipulation inside of your Power Automate flow. So for example, based on the user that's calling the flow, you could then do some checks to see, okay, should the user be accessing that file or not, and any other rule you might want to implement just for increased security. And then after you do the work you want to do, like do your checks or connect to any external data source, you can return the response to Power Pages, and Power Pages processes the flow response with the JavaScript. So now, enough of theory, I'm gonna jump into the demo. So here, what I have is simply a basic SharePoint library with a bunch of folders, with a bunch of files, and then there's one of the folders that is empty. There are folders here with subfolders. So I just wanted to show in Power Pages as well that we can browse folder by folder and extract the contents. There are files here that I simply downloaded, like I searched on Microsoft Learns for PDF files just to use as examples, because I'm going to browse them and preview them from Power Pages as well, right? And here in my Power Pages site, there is a page. It's a very, very basic page with only one table on it. But when the page loads, my JavaScript code runs, calls the flows, calls the flow to list the files from SharePoint. And then I simply don't pass the folder as a parameter to the flow, which basically lists the root folder of my SharePoint library. So if I come here and click a folder to open it, I send the folder parameter to the flow, get the data, pass it back, and update my page. And the same happens when I browse a folder with content. So for instance, this one, I have the files inside the folder. I have a subfolder. If I click a subfolder, I can browse it. I can use the mimicated breadcrumb here to browse the folders and go back and forth. Then if the file is a PDF file, I have implemented other options as well. We have download option here where I can download any type of file, not only PDF files. it thinks a little bit. I think on this case, I've chosen a bad file because it's a big one. Downloads the file, and then it's gonna pop over here in my another tab. Let's see. If it takes long, I'm gonna open another one. Yep, so it took a little bit to load, but you could see that I opened the release wave one for Power Platform. And obviously, if I want to preview in a new tab, I click that button, it runs, it opens the file on a new tab. So now that I've explored what I have in SharePoint, how it works in Power Pages, I want to show how you configure the flows and how it looks. Then later I will explain how to. I will explain how to call that via JavaScript. Inside of Power Pages now, guys, if you have a look at the setup workspace, there's this Cloud Flows option that's not in preview anymore, that you can add existing flows if you have any with the Power Pages trigger in the same environment of your Power Pages site, or you can create a new one from scratch. But in this case, I already have the example flows created. And then, as I mentioned, I have one flow that gets the SharePoint file content, another flow that lists the SharePoint folder contents. If you click here to edit the flow, you're going to see there's one option, that's the flow URL. And that's what you need to copy and paste in your JavaScript code. And also you have the roles that you have to add to the flow. So what that means is there's something in Power Pages used for permissions that is called the web roles. If a person doesn't have a web role assigned, and if the web role assigned is not assigned, if the web role is not assigned to a flow, you cannot call the flow from JavaScript because you won't have access to it. So you have to add the person to a web role and then add that web role to the Power Automate flow. Inside of the Power Automate flow, for the SharePoint, for the flow to list the SharePoint folder contents, the idea is very basic. Like I try to make it very simple for illustrative purposes. So for example, you have a flow, you get a folder name as a parameter in the flow, then you simply run the SharePoint action to get files from a folder. So if you don't specify a folder, it's going to be blank. Then you call only the root folder of the library, return the value with all the files that you have in the folder as JSON to your Power Pages. And the same happens if you check the flow to download the contents from a file. So you send a file ID as a parameter to the flow, then another action, SharePoint action, gets the file and returns the file as base64 to the JavaScript code. If you want to edit your code, you have now an option that you can use to edit via VS Code, guys. I won't do it because it takes a little bit to load and it takes time. So if you can edit the Power Pages code via VS Code in the browser, it's in preview. But in my case here, I have already downloaded it locally. And the gist of it is that there's a web page in Power Pages, and you can edit it via VS Code and add anything custom you want. So in this case, it's basically a simple placeholder for my table with another one for the spinner to show the loading content, some inline styles as well. And in the JavaScript piece of code, what we have is the two flows stored as variables. So it's those addresses that you copy from Power Pages. Then there's this jQuery function that runs when the page loads, when the DOM contents are ready in the page. We run this function to load the SharePoint folder contents without a parameter. That function simply sets up the payload to send to the Power Automate flow. Then a function runs an Ajax post into Power Automate for that flow to get the folder content. And when it's successful, we're going to call this function generate SharePoint table. That is basically a function to parse the JSON data and do some checks. So for example, for each of the items we got from SharePoint, we simply check if the item is a folder, I'm going to add a button that calls again the same function to load the SharePoint folder contents, but now passing the path of the folder. Otherwise, if it's a file, I have a function here to open the SharePoint document. And if it's a PDF file, I am adding a function here to same function to open the document, but just to add a new parameter to open the document in a new tab. And what this function to open the document does is the same idea as the other one, but now to get the file contents. So we generate the payload to send to Power Automate, run the call, and now we just check if the file is preview. I do the download. If it's not preview, I run the file download. Otherwise, I open the file in a new tab. And those are simply functions to, so like the download base64 file, I generate a HTML auto-clickable element and force the download of the base64 content. In the second one, I'm simply generating a copy of the file locally and opening it in a new tab. So that's pretty much me, guys.
Awesome stuff. Thank you for that. I love how you're bringing together all these technology with Power Platform and JavaScript and melding it all together in a seamless solution. So excellent job there. Thank you so much. Put the links in the chat to his blog and some Microsoft Learn pages he was referencing. So definitely check it out, everybody. And with that, let's get into our last demo. So let me just set this up. All righty. Okay, all right. So let's talk about some Power Platform and Microsoft 365 animation tips. We're going to talk about today the Powerful Animations VS Code extension. And you may be like, what is that? Well, let's find out together. My name is David Warner. I am a enthusiast for the community. I run a blog called Warner.digital, and I work at Microsoft. And hey, I'm hosting the call. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So the agenda, again, the best investment is in the tools of one's own trade, right? So in my last session, we talked about using VS Code. So today we're going to talk specifically about using VS Code for SVG animations and how you can put them into Power Apps, right? And then we're going to preview a new extension called Powerful Animations, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's next. All right, so just for those that a reminder, Visual Studio Code is really a fantastic tool for all of us to use, whether we're in the Power Platform or not. It is super useful. It's got tons of features and add-ons and extensions and really cool things that you can do with it. So that's going to be the premise. You can go get it at ak.ms/VSC if you'd like. But let's talk about animations. So when we're talking about preparing SVG animations for Power Apps, you have to go through and kind of do this, I don't know, it's a little bit of a process, right? So you have to search and replace the double quotes with single quotes for pasting into animations or pasting into VS Code, or pasting into Power Apps. Thank you. There we go. And then you need to prefix it and suffix it, essentially put something at the beginning and the end to make it work, right? So is there a better way? Is there a better way? Well, let's take a look. So I'm going to pop on over to VS Code here. And I've got an SVG opened up here, and using some of those extensions that I talked about in the last one, which is an SVG extension I'll give you the links for later. It's not what we're going to focus on today, but you can preview the SVG. So what I've got there is just a little football going through this quick little animation thing, right, that goes through and looks like it's being kicked off and flying through the air. Something real simple. It's really just using a rotation animation. It's very, very simple, right? So that's what we should see it doing when we go into Power Apps. So if I come in here and I select all and I just copy my SVG, we know it's working because I just previewed it right here, right? So we know that it's actually functioning as expected. But if I go over into Power Apps and I have my little prefix here, right? That's what you have to prefix and suffix it with. So you kind of a wrapper, if you will. And I paste that. Oh, what happens? It doesn't work, right? It's because all those double quotes need to be converted to single quotes, which you can do, absolutely. So if we go back here and I were to do a search and replace, and I were to do double quotes to single quotes. Now watch what happens specifically maybe right around here, right? We'll see all of our double quotes get converted to single quotes, but when I convert all, one of the things that kind of happens, you start losing a little bit of functionality. I had that dynamic ability to identify the color, right? Which was cool. And now it's gone away. But hey, you know what? It does work. So let me copy and let's go back over into Power Apps. and we'll paste that in there, and bam, now it shows up. Well, that's great. But is there a better, more seamless process? Because let's face it, when we are working within VS Code and we're working with SVGs, there is a standard, right? And to be honest with you, the out-of-the-box standard is double quotes. And so we get those abilities. See, when I hover over the color there, I'm able to then go in and modify things through a nice, cool little interface, right? That's beneficial. So you lose a little functionality. We could convert it and just use single quotes, but also keep in mind most other files that you are going to go get from the internet or you create out of Illustrator or something like that is going to be coming with double quotes because it's the standard. So is there a better way? Yes. So I have created something called Powerful Animations. It is a very simple little extension. It's got big aspirations though, lots more coming soon. But what is the first thing that it's doing for us? Well, it's first of all, it's in preview, right? So I've got it out there. It's available to you. I'll give you the link in a moment. But essentially, it gives us a couple of features. So one is let's automatically convert these double quotes to single quotes, right? And let's do it to where I don't have to modify the existing code that I'm looking at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all. It's based on your selection. So if you're working in a bigger file, then you could absolutely just select a portion of it. Maybe you've got an HTML file that's got some SVGs embedded, and you only want those SVGs. In this case, the SVG is the only thing I'm working with. And I'm going to hit the F1 key or Shift Control P on our keyboard. This Shift Command P, I think was what it is for a Mac. But you can see I've got a couple of choices up here for my new extension. One is convert to single quotes, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinitiate that. I'm going to select convert to single quotes. And then down here on the bottom, I got a nice little notification. Hey, beginning converting, double quotes converted to single quotes on selected and copied to my clipboard. So now when I go back over to my Power Apps, and I paste that in, bam, it's there, and it's all ready for me, right? So I did not have to go through and do a manual search and replace at all within my VS Code. So benefit number one. Now, what if you don't already have the prefix and suffix or the wrapper pre-ready for you? What if you just have a nice little image with a blank image field control, right? So if I go back into VS Code, I'm still going to select everything. And then instead this time, and we're probably going to change this because I was actually talking to April and she said this is useful for HTML as well. So I'm going to say prepare for Power Apps. We'll probably remove that SVG. But what that's going to do is it's going to automatically add that prefix and suffix for me. Right. So if I know I'm just using a holistic SVG, I don't already have image control prepped with that suffix and prefix, and I just want all of it done in one nice, neat little package for me, well, that's doable too. So I'm going to select that. We get the little message down here, again, that it's ready to go. And if I go back over into Power Apps now, bam, there we go. And you'll notice that I've got that suffix there, right? If I go back to the home, I've already got this prefix added for me. It's not using, of course, line breaks because it's just putting it all together, which is fine, but it's doing exactly what it's intended to do, right? Which is combine the prefix with the SVG code, with the single quotes, with the suffix, wrapping it all together so that I can utilize it here within my Power App. All right, so pretty simple stuff, right? Again, humble beginnings, big aspirations. So let's come back to our slides, and you can go get that at aka.ms/VSC/powerful animations. Again, lots more in store. We'll talk about in a moment. Now, that live preview that I had shown you, you can actually go get that live preview extension here at that URL. I'll put all these in the chat. I'll have it in my blog post as well. And then also the SVG extension, which is useful and provides some additional functionality there as well. Those are things that I went over in the last video, so we can link to that as well. So where do I get all those wonderful toys, right? Like the Joker, you can get them here. But what is next? Well, I'd like to start creating an animation gallery of stock animations in this extension to where if you come in on the sidebar, you're able to go in and peruse or browse from a collection of animations, pre-built animations that you could just put into your VS Code window and then move into Power Apps using, of course, the functionality that provides you that prefix and suffix, or just converting to single quotes, and then dynamic variable snippets, right? Looking to add some of those. So if you're working in an animation or if you're working in an SVG, and you're like, you know what, I would really love this particular part of the SVG to rotate, but I'm not overly familiar with the CSS required for rotation or transforming or translating or whatever, we'll have some dynamic variable snippets available and ready for you. And then some common animation snippets as well, the dynamic variable will be inserting dynamic variables so that you can actually put those into Power Apps and make it a dynamic component, right? So that was the intent there. And then the common animation snippets will give you that rotation and stuff like that. So looking to add some of that, that's all just top of mind. And for me, that's it, everybody. So just a real simple little humble SVG or extension. Go get it, download it, let me know what you think. And again, I'm looking to add more very, very soon. All right. Well, let's wrap this call up. We want to thank, actually, let me go back to our presenters. Yes, we want to thank all of our presenters for today. Lee and Michael for doing an awesome job bringing it. Really, really appreciate it. So we encourage everyone to fill out that form and get that all, your own demos on board on the schedule. We'd love to hear from you and see your stuff. All right. You can also get involved in our Discord server. So this is growing daily. It's a great way to kind of have a one-stop shop ability to collaborate with the community on a variety of topics, all from one location. It's growing in popularity, Discord itself. So definitely go check that out, even if you're just there every once in a while. And then we're also looking for some feedback. So if you like these calls, then please let us know. Even if you've already let us know again, because our management loves to see that they're useful. They heard a lot of it from the MVPs at MVP Summit, so thank you. But definitely let them know, and that way we can get additional resources to improve the calls. All right, well, the recording will be available in 24 hours or less on the Microsoft 365 Power Platform Community YouTube channel. Go subscribe today, aka.ms/community/videos. You're going to see Teams tell you that the video is ready to download, but it's a pretty little liar. It's not, unless you're working for Microsoft. So it'll just lead to blue screens of death and tears, and nobody wants that. So subscribe today. You'll get alerted as soon as the video drops, and you can follow us on Twitter or X or whatever they're going to call it next at M365PNP. The next M365 and Power Platform bi-weekly call is April 11, 2 weeks from today. Of course, in 1 week, we've got our Viva Connections and SharePoint Framework call on April 4th. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Great to be back. Super excited for what we're going to be building for the rest of the year. And thank you for all the hard work that you put into this community. It would not be possible without you. We really, really appreciate everything you do. So thank you.